Hey guys, welcome back to another Virgo Girl recommendation, and I am super excited to do this video. Oh my goodness. Okay, so basically, I have, I'm late to the party. Let me just start off by saying that once again. I did not know that Milli Vanilli had a documentary, and that came out, I think it came out about a year ago, and then there's another one another Milli Vanilli documentary that's on Paramount that came out in 2023. So I watched both of them yesterday. They were both very enlightening. Um, I just want to first, before I even get into this, let's just start off. I'm going to start off by saying if you feel that Milli Vanilli, um, or I should say, I'm asking you, do you feel that Milli Vanilli, like the group itself, did something wrong? Or do you feel like it wasn't really a big deal? After watching both of these documentaries, I feel like, well, okay, so in my mind today, I'm thinking, I'm watching it and I'm living in 2025, so I'm thinking like, what was the big deal? Like, what? I mean, I get what the big deal was. They weren't singing. Let me just clarify. But I guess I'm just looking at the fact that the music itself was amazing. It was amazing. I'm not taking anything from the music. I think that everything about the music was everything that it was supposed to be, and it gave everything that people loved back then. And I feel that that's why it was so successful, because it was amazing music, okay? However, when you look at a group like Milli Vanilli, it's like holding a mirror up to society, because we have to then dig a little deeper. And the guy, the producer, he even said if he put the real voices, I mean the real people who sang up, then it wouldn't have became what it became, if you will. So in saying that, look at the music we would have missed out on. And I agree with that. I feel that society is so shallow that even though the music was so great, I mean, we see this today. There are artists who are great artists, but because they don't have that certain look, they don't get pushed, or they don't get the same success as some other artists who don't have a fourth of the talent that they have. So yeah, it is a shallow industry. So what this guy did was he just blended everything together. And at the time, it was the results he got were outstanding. It worked. It was perfect. But for the time that he was in, it wasn't, because this was back before the internet. This was before auto tune. This was before TikTok. Before people were free thinkers, as they are. I mean, I'm sure there were free thinkers, but I mean before this era, this new era that we're in, where everyone's kind of like gives people the benefit of the doubt more, where people are quick to say, well, no, that person was a victim because of X, Y, Z, et cetera, et cetera. We live in a different time. So when I watched this Milli Vanilli thing, I'm like, why didn't they just, why did they have to be so hard on them? I think that's what I took away from this whole thing. So let me just go ahead and tell you a little bit about it. Basically, and for you guys, put a 1 in the chat if you think that Milli Vanilli shouldn't have gotten all the backlash, and put a 2 in the chat if you feel that they got everything they deserved and they should have received all the backlash they received. Now, what happened was Milli Vanilli, they were this group, this duo, and just a little backstory. They're from Germany. Well, one guy was from Paris, I believe. He was from France, and then the other guy was from Germany, Munich, I think, or some town close by, and they met in Germany. So Germany is where all this started. They were dancers. The one guy, Rob, he was a break dancer, and Fab was a more, I guess, like traditional dancer where he did more choreographed dances, and he also was a choreographer. So they both got together like that, just doing things like dancing. And at first, it was kind of like the way he described it, I'm sorry, the way Fab described it, Rob has passed away, rest in peace to him. But Fab, the way he described it is that initially they were kind of like not really like getting along really, because there weren't many black people well, I guess there were just really no black people in the town really, and they were like the only, there were two of very few, I guess. So it kind of stood out, and Rob felt like Fab was like kind of like coming into his turf, if you will. So it was like he described that they kind of like dated the same girls. It was just like, a small, like he was like kind of like stepping on his toes, if you will. And so he didn't really like that. And then initially they ended up joining forces and felt that they were stronger together. Moving right along from that, they ended up getting discovered, and they ended up getting a record contract, which is the juicy part. We'll skip past all of the other stuff. There's more to the documentary that is very important, and that's also good. But you're going to hopefully you go watch it, so I don't have to sit here and tell you the whole thing. Now, there are going to be, to me, when it comes to this, it's not really spoilers, because this is a story that pretty much, if you don't know their story, it would become spoilers, but it's a pretty famous story. For those of you who don't know Milli Vanilli, you may want to Google them. When I think of Milli Vanilli today, they do kind of have this, it's kind of like almost like they're like the butt of a joke, kind of like a meme, if you will. They just became this joke, they became a joke, because, well, let me not get ahead of myself. Let's go back. So these two young men, they were very young. I believe they were teenagers. At the time, and they were trying to make it. They said that they were. Rob speaks about how they were. I'm sorry, Fab. I keep saying Rob. Fab spoke about how they were poor. Extremely poor. They didn't have money, but they were artists. They really loved music, and they wanted to be in the music industry. But like anybody that's trying to break into the music industry with no connections or anything, just trying to break in, it's going to be tough. So somehow they ended up being able to, get a contract. They ended up being able to link up with a guy named Frank Farian, or Farian. I'm not sure exactly what's the correct pronunciation, but he was able to see them, and he had a vision. So Frank, the way they describe it, he already had the music in mind, but he just needed a face to go with the music. And I guess he had done this in the past as well with some other group that went, that was a really big group as well. So he already knew how to do this, but I don't think, well, the way they describe it, that he didn't know that it was going to go, they were going to be as big as they became. And I think that's what happened. They became so big that the whole thing just kind of fell apart, because the world, they went to America, first of all. And, once you get to America, that's it. You can go to the stratosphere, if you will. So they were doing good in Germany, and then they started doing good, in Europe and Spain, just in different areas, but not America. They hadn't hit the American market yet. Once the song that they had was "The Girl You Know Is True," and that's a very popular song. That was their first song that really, took off. So they ended up, coming to America. They ended up getting, starting to work with American, what do you call it? I guess managers. They got into the industry in America, and they ended up, as far from what Fab said, they weren't signed to Arista, but the producer was signed to Arista, so they were still like Arista artists, by way of their producer Frank. Well, they ended up becoming the hottest thing out. It was Milli Vanilli. It was crazy. And this was way back in like the late 80s, 90s, early 90s. So they took America by storm, and they really, really, really took off. They ended up doing other songs, Blame It on the Rain. Don't Forget My Number, Baby Don't Forget My Number, and there's one, oh, it's a tragedy for, uh, it's a tragedy or something. I don't know what the name of that song is, but something about it's a tragedy for me to see the dream is over or something like that. Yeah, they sang that song. Those were their big hits, and they ended up just living the life. And it's unfortunate because, like the guy said, it's like they almost, one of them, I think it was Rob that said that it's almost like they sold their soul to the devil, if you will. And, it's so sad. I feel like when you look at the industry, so many people, once they make it to like Hollywood, it's like, they're doing their thing, they're fine. And once they make it to Hollywood, it's like, what happens? I don't know what it is, but once they make it there, it's like it eats them up, if you will. They really, as the saying goes, they drank the Kool-Aid, if you will. They were sex, drugs, and rock and roll, literally. They were really into drugs. They were with a bunch of women. They were just doing the whole, rock star life, to the 10th power. And from the documentary, what was so funny about it is where I kind of like hold them accountable. There were some scenes where it showed that they were, this was in the Girl You Know Is True documentary. So I kind of like, there's two documentaries. The Girl You Know Is True is on Prime. And then the one is just, I think that one is just titled Milli Vanilli. That one is on Paramount. Anyway, so what really made me think, because I had to imagine what it would have been like back then, and I'm just, kind of take myself out of the present. I'm kind of thinking that another thing that kind of messed them up, it seemed like they were, Rob, at least from what they showed, I'm not sure if Fab was too, but Fab seemed a little bit more laid back, but Rob seemed to be very, very like, how like some celebrities, they just have like bad attitudes and they don't treat people very well. They're just kind of like, I don't know, not the nicest. I saw like they showed him like throwing a tray because he didn't have his sushi. They showed him kind of like being a little aggressive with people. So it gave me the idea that they may have also created some enemies along the way, in doing the music. Another thing that I saw in the documentary that was on Paramount, this was a different one. So the one that was on the documentary that I saw on Prime, that one was actors. So that one was a little different. It was actors playing them. The one on the other documentary, the one that's Milli Vanilli, that one was just actually just people talking about them. So that's the difference. But the one where, another thing with the one on Paramount where it showed them at the real Milli Vanilli at the Grammys, winning the Grammy, I noticed that there were some groups, I believe it was De La Soul, and I can't think of the other group, but there were some groups in the audience that were just sitting there looking like, not clapping at all, and just looking like, like whatever, like, they can't believe it, and that it's like they almost knew that this was like a scam. So I feel that the secret, people in Hollywood, I feel that they probably did know, but it was just like something that people didn't talk about, maybe like out loud. Maybe it was just like kind of like a group chat thing, if you will. I don't know, but it was just kind of weird that the way the people were looking. I get that people are disappointed when certain people don't win or if they don't win, but this looked a little different. This looked a little deeper to me when I looked at the audience, when they showed, pan to the audience when they won. Because most of the time on the award shows, those people, they'll fake it, anyway. But it was just a little odd to see the people's faces when they won. But moving right along, this documentary was so sad because it showed how, Hollywood can eat you up, chew you up, and spit you out. And when I say Hollywood, I'm just saying that because Hollywood is just a word I'm using, but it could be wherever you are, because they were in Germany at first, and the guy in Germany was the one who had them sign this contract that got them into the predicament that they were in. The sad part about it is these guys were young, very young they were young and they were hungry, like you know, in a way that it can be healthy, but they were also hungry literally, and they didn't have means. They said they were extremely poor at the time. They were barely making it too. So it was like the perfect storm. It was like the perfect storm because he caught them at a time where they were vulnerable. They needed money. They were desperate even. And they also were desperate to become, break into the music industry. That was like their dream. So yeah, he caught them at a time where it was they were an easy lick, if you will. Now, here's where I guess, controversy comes in at. They said that it all kind of came to an end because of the Grammys. That was the beginning of the end of winning a Grammy. The one thing I thought was so shady was, so at the Grammys, they were saying that everyone has to perform live at the Grammys, but I guess a lot of money was paid by someone high up. I think it was their manager or someone that worked with the labels. But anyway, I can't remember who they said this guy's name was right now. But when you watch the documentary, you'll see. So apparently, someone, some powerful person made it so they could perform without singing live, which is not the way it works. So even that was weird. So that lets you know that they were all in on it. They all had to know something. But I feel like once the public found out and once once everything was out, they kind of like washed their hands of it and everyone pretended like they didn't know what was going on. Oh my God, I didn't know. Everyone pretended to be innocent. But I don't think that was the case at all. What happened as far as the beginning of the end? So the Grammy was the beginning of the people like knowing that this was going to come to an end because of course all eyes were going to be on them, and it would just be more of a spectacle. Then they were also at that time partying a lot. Uh, Fab was said that they were doing all kinds of drugs and things. Like he said, all types, every type that you can pretty much think of. They were doing it, and they were also drinking, and they were just doing everything. Like I said, living the rock star life. So they weren't thinking clearly either because they were high out of their mind. And he said they were high a lot, almost all the time. So that was an issue, and I guess Fab was able to, clean himself up after the downfall, after, they, you know, lost their career. But unfortunately, Rob was really, really deep into his addiction and he wasn't able to shake it, even, despite rehab attempts, many, 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 many rehab attempts. So that was his ultimate downfall, the drugs. But, how they got into it, he was saying, was they weren't doing anything like that. They weren't into drugs or anything like that. But because they were doing these tours, these huge tours where they were like selling out, it was like some kind of MTV tour. I think they mentioned that they were doing with some other artists, but these were huge tours. And even Milli Vanilli themselves, they were saying how they were selling out, these huge venues as well. I believe they were saying that they were selling out stadiums, or yeah, I believe it was stadiums that they were selling out for the most part. And of course, they were doing arenas. That would be very easy for them. They sold, I believe he said 14 million records worldwide, and they also sold 33 million singles worldwide. Now, this was back in the 80s and 90s, the early 90s. So, of course, this was actual physical copies. And I believe back then they probably were paying like $10 for an album, something like that they mentioned. I mean, you do the math. And that's just the music. That's not counting the tours, all the tours they did. They had a lot of merch. I mean, they were very, very popular. Back then, they used to do like the dolls, the merch. People like to buy stuff like that, posters, things like that. Magazines. People actually bought magazines and they were on magazines. I don't know if they got a part of that, but I'm just saying they were a huge, huge asset to whoever, was involved with them. And then come to find out with this, the contract they had, they barely made any money at all. From what he was saying, not even a drop in the bucket compared to what they made for the labels and the producer, just everyone else. They were saying that everyone else got rich, but they did not. They didn't know, they had, when they signed their contract, he was saying that there was no lawyer, there was no manager, there was nothing, no one was there but just them. So, I mean, that's, man, that's so sad. And then, they ended up just losing everything, of course. Once it was, so the downfall, let's get to that part. I'm kind of jumping around because I don't want to just say, I want to give you guys an opportunity to watch it and have some level of surprise with some of the things. So anyway, the downfall part. So with Milli Vanilli, I've always thought that the reason why Milli Vanilli, ultimately disbanded was because there was a performance where they were singing, and then of course they weren't really singing. It wasn't their vocals; it was someone else's vocals. So they always used like a backtrack and they lip synced. So at one performance, the track was skipping, and so Rob ran off the stage, and they just didn't know what to do. And I thought that was it. I thought that's what ended, Milli Vanilli. I never thought anything else of it. It was just, I mean, there was no internet back then, so it was just like I just always thought that's how they ended their career. Well, that was corrected in the doc, in one of the, I think it was the one that was on Paramount, the one that actually was just the Rob talking, and just the people. I mean, I'm sorry, Fab talking, and then the people that were involved, other people that were involved. They ultimately said that he said that was just like a skip. That did not affect them because they ended up coming back out and finishing the song. But it was just something that people kind of like told that story, and it just sounded good. But he said that's not what ended their career. What ultimately ended their career was the actual producer. So while after they were all famous, they had already won the Grammy. They were just big time, and of course they were full of themselves. They were looking to, he said, go and do other things, like take a little pivot and actually, do their own thing, but actually sing for real. And they were looking to go another direction. They were in America at this time, so they had American, more options, and then by them being so hot, they just had more options. They were going back and forth with this producer and telling him, look, you have to give me more money, you have to do this. And, they were like pushing him. And so he just decided he was going to end it all. So he did a press release and just told the world that Milli Vanilli didn't sing a word on their songs. They were, fake, blah, 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 and that was it. They were saying how their career, it was just like, almost like within a day. It was like night and day. Like one day they were famous, and it's like almost like the next day it was just over. And it was just a lot of backlash. So they just showed how people were, there were all kinds of class action lawsuits. It was just a lot going on after, people found out that they weren't singing. Now, to me, I think that was a lot. I mean, I just think they did a lot, especially considering now we have people who use like auto-tune. We have people that, it's just so much today that they prop people up who are not talented, but it's okay because they have this look. I mean, we literally do that all the time now. So with them, it's almost like you guys were just born in the wrong era, if you will. My honest opinion is I don't think they should have gotten all the backlash they got, especially with the fact that the actual people that were behind this, the big guys, the labels, the producer, everyone else, and all the people who knew they would have had to know, they just kind of like went on about their lives and kept making their millions. The producer guy, it's so funny because they were talking about how powerful this guy was. I guess even like back then, this guy, I'm not sure what year it was, but they talked about this guy's wealth. I think even back in like the 90s, he was already, don't quote me on this, but I think they said he had already like maybe $500,000, or not $500,000, maybe like 500 million or $250 million or something he was worth. He was very, very wealthy. So he was already very well established. So this is not someone who was hurting in any way. And then of course all the labels like that dealt with him in America, the people in America they dealt with. I think they said they dealt with BMG, Arista, all of those people went on to do big things, and they were just fine. It's like they didn't, it didn't affect them the way it helped affected those two guys who barely even spoke English when they, you know, came to America. So it's just so funny how it's like everything like kind of landed on them. I don't agree with that. I just feel like I see a lot of people saying, well, I see a mixed bag on this. Some people say, well, they could have walked away, but they were really literally like, and this is not, I don't want to like make excuses for them because you should never like, I guess, integrity is important. So I don't want this to come off the wrong way, but I just feel like it was it's just the situation they were in. I just feel that because they were teenagers, they were naive, they poor, and so yeah, they saw them coming a mile away, if you will, and even today, I wonder how many people would turn something like that down if they were in their situations. Someone that was looking to get into the music industry. People do all kinds of stuff to get into the music industry. Even today, all these stunts and things people pull just to get attention. So, yeah, I think the backlash, all the jokes, it was a lot. I mean, one of them lost their lives behind, because he couldn't take it. He ended up, I think they ruled his death as like an overdose. He had a really, really, really bad drug problem. And he ended up, they were doing, I think when they were like, when they were like hot, I think that, well, I know that they were saying that they were doing drugs, but I think the big downfall, well, for me anyway, when I hear that someone's, graduates or, progresses or starts using or whatever crack, it's like, for me, it's like every time, it's like that's the beginning of the end. And it's not just that; it's other substances too that do that. But it's just something about the crack back then that really took people down. And in one instance, Fab was saying that he even saw him outside the Viper Room. That was like a popular club in LA back in the day. And he was like on the ground. He was like he barely could even recognize him because he at that point he was so strung out, uh, on the drugs. And I guess he had started using crack, and that really took him down fast. So it's really unfortunate. He even did. They were even talking about he even did some time in jail. The Rock did the other member of the group. Just the drugs. And it was all due to the drug addiction. So it's really a sad story. Even though like Fab, I was watching his interviews, he seems to be doing fine. He now has, I don't know if he's married. They said partner, so I don't know if he's married, but I know he has children. He has, a partner, and they seem happy. He has at least three children. Three beautiful, beautiful children that I saw. I don't know if he has more, but I saw at least three, and he has a family, and that's so important. But despite all that, they went through a lot, and I think they weren't treated as humans. They just treated them so poor. They just did not care about their feelings at all. They just treated them like they were just outcasts after that whole thing went down. So, and they never were able to make a comeback in the music industry in that way. So I guess the gentleman that's the survivor, the only survivor of the group, he is making music. He's doing what he loves. He's able to make music, and he has a family. So his ending was a lot happier than, of course, Rob's, who ended up passing away, unfortunately. What I got out of that is I think that the music industry is very tough, and you can easily lose your soul, lose your way. I think it's a very, very fast lifestyle. If you're not rooted, if you don't have like a support system and people that can keep you grounded, I think it can go bad real fast. And I think the substances are so plentiful, and it's looked at as so common. It seems, I don't know, I'm not in that industry, and I don't live that type of lifestyle, but it seems that it's so readily accessible to people the substances is the beginning of the end, for these people. I just feel that every time they start dabbling in that, and they end up getting it's just too much. The fame, the substances. I think it just all ends up becoming too much, and I think it becomes something that ultimately brings them to the end. It eats them up, if you will. It's just too much. Because I mean, after all, these people are only human. I mean, they're only human. And the final thing I'll say about this is, it's kind of good that they weren't in. Well, I look at it kind of two ways. I kind of feel like if they were, I was going to say it's kind of good they weren't in the internet age, because the internet would have ate them up, or eaten them up, sorry. But, a part of me says, maybe not. Maybe they would have had supporters that backed them, and maybe it would have had a different ending, because maybe the internet would have looked at it differently, if it would have been in a time where there was internet. I don't know. What do you guys think? Again, the music that came out of that group, the performances, the looks, I mean, all of that, it was so amazing. So if nothing else, I think they deserve, a little something for that. I mean, because they performed their asses off. They really, really did. They were great performers. And I mean, to pull that off, I mean, they did what they were put there to do. They had someone, a powerful person put them in charge to do something. I mean, put them in place to do something, and they executed it perfectly. It just was not real. The real singers, they have spoken out as well, and you'll see that in the documentaries. They spoke out, the real singers, and they have their opinions on things, as they should. It's just a lot to take in, because I keep thinking about those songs, and just how people loved that music. So how was it supposed to be distributed to the world? Because like the guy said, if it would have been the other faces on that music, it wouldn't have been the same. It just wouldn't have. And actually, they tried to do, they showed where they tried to do something like, it was a group called the Real Milli Vanilli, and I think they had some of the real singers in there, or just like different people or whatever, and it didn't work at all. It just wasn't the same. So the music was amazing, of course. We're never going to take anything from that, but it was the music coupled with Rob and Fab that made it what it was. That's what made it so popular. It was perfect for that time. It was like the MTV age, where MTV was, doing the videos, and, yeah, it was what was needed to make it work. But unfortunately, they didn't accept that back then. And here's my thing too. I wonder why they didn't just try to like train them to sing. Like, oh, you know what? Actually, the actual producer said he felt that they couldn't sing. That's why. But now, I'm sorry, Fab. I saw they showed that he actually sings now, and he, was singing, and he's a pretty good singer. So, it's just really odd, because I feel like the way he sounds, they could have almost made it work if they would have just given them a little bit more training. They could have almost made that work, to where they kind of incorporated their voices even a little bit or something, and let them sing, some of it. I don't know. Anyway, guys, tell me what you guys think. If you do watch it, comment below. Let me know if you guys know the music, know the story, and let me know your thoughts. Until next time, peace.